Hello, everybody. This is Tom Eckert here. You're listening to my podcast, Numerology, a GPS for the Soul. This is your place to learn about the true power of numerology and how to use it to bring out the best in yourself, understand your loved ones better, take wise decisions, and prepare for your future. In other words, how to live your life aligned with your true destiny. Take your time to educate yourself and share these podcasts with your friends and family so they too can enjoy the great benefits of numerology. Enjoy! Hello there and welcome to all my listeners. Today we're diving into a unique episode that's going to talk about the polarized thinking that we see exacerbated during our time throughout the entire world, and how the numbers contribute to polarized thinking. It's going to be very interesting. So let's dive in. But if you're new here, first of all, I want to welcome you to my podcast and tell you that in this podcast, we discuss numerology as a path for inner transformation, spiritual growth, self-knowledge. In my personal style is to try to make numerology accessible, grounded, applicable for everyday life matters, and help you apply numerology in order to live a life that is much more conscious and aligned with your true self, with your true purpose and your soul. Now, in case you want to dive deeper into numerology, here are a few ways you can do so. First, you can book a numerology reading directly with me. In a numerology reading, you can ask any question that is burning and important in your life and get precise self-tailored answers, especially to you. You can read more about my readings, the type of readings I offer, and contact me through the link in the episode description to book your reading with me. If you wish to dive a bit deeper and you want to study numerology on a deeper level or perhaps pursue it as a career, then I invite you to check out my two numerology study paths. The first one is my self-study numerology courses that give you the rare opportunity to learn numerology online at your own pace on your mobile device, your tablet, or your laptop. My library currently includes 2 self-study courses, but more coming up. Or if you want to be initiated into the real rare depths of numerology and become a true professional, you can sign up to my complete path of certification where you study directly with me one-on-one all the way from a total beginner to a numerology expert, and you get certified along the way as a professional numerologist. Again, to read more about both study paths, check out the links in the episode description. The times we currently live in are marked by more extreme and polarized thinking. There's a growing tendency to strongly identify with one camp and think in black and white instead of a more holistic way of perceiving things, a more inclusive way. Because I truly believe in wisdom and its transformative power to bring about peace and sanity, I will show you in this episode how different arrangements and types of numbers contribute to more extreme and polarized thinking. By doing so, I hope to bring more awareness to how each and every one of us tends to contribute to polarization instead of unity, peace, and wisdom. After listening to this entire episode, I highly recommend you calculate your 5 core numbers and see where you find yourself on the scale or list of parameters I will soon introduce. There is one section where I speak about conflicted numbers. For that section, you might need to learn more about number combinations. And to do that, you can sign up to my self-study numerology course about number combinations. We will start by talking about charts that mostly embody even numbers. Even numbers are 2, 4, 6, and 8. Their general tendency is to be more conventional, conservative, agreeing with the norm, and less leaning towards rebellion and thinking out of the box. They also prefer stability over change. Now, for this reason, people with a mostly even numbered chart will tend to have static opinions that are hard to change. They tend to think that because the majority is saying something, it is right. It also feels better to stand where the majority is because that's more safe, known, stable. You feel backed up by the masses. So, whatever the trend is around them, socially, politically, or otherwise, they will tend to identify with that and refuse to acknowledge any other path or possibility. That's their unique way of polarizing. Clearly, if you don't follow the norm or what they consider as the norm, you are simply wrong. Period. Their mind has many taboos, many shoulds and shouldn'ts. In other words, a strong super ego, as Freud basically explained the meaning of the term. And if you express something that challenges those taboos, you are simply canceled. On the other side, or on the other end of that spectrum, we have the odd numbers. They include 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Now, their general tendency is to be individualistic, think outside the box, and break the rules. They don't like taboos, and they love challenging them. In a way, loving to be other, quote unquote, is their fixation. Loving to rebel, just for the heck of it, to go against the rule. And that's their polarized way of thinking. They naturally have or inherently, we can say, a slightly more extreme behavior and more focused on what they believe in, very often, regardless of what others are saying, including reliable sources sometimes. So they tend to think that they see a truth that others don't see or don't want to see. They feel like they are the righteous rebels, the revolutionaries that hold and bring the more advanced truth. They create polarization by not being good listeners and by not respecting what reliable sources have to say, even if what they say is right, simply because they need to break the rule. They might also tend to create more antagonism and resistance in others due to their rebellious, pardon me, rebellious nature of communication. Next, we have the emotional numbers. In this group, I would include numbers 2 and 6 mainly, and 7 partially. These numbers tend to feel into things. They see reality and events through feelings. And because of that, they can get overly identified with the emotional side of things, failing to see the many other important and relevant layers of a matter. They get so identified that they cannot even hear a more clear and bright intellectual explanation to events. Let's say in a social situation, they might simply get identified with a person they see crying on the floor, brokenhearted. And even though turns out that person was an aggressor a moment ago to their partner, they will identify so strongly with their pain and heartbreak that they won't be able to see clearly. So, they contribute to polarized thinking in that they only accept emotions as their barometer for truth. If you don't feel enough according to their standards, your truth doesn't count. You see this black and white approach that I was mentioning in the beginning? Now, number 7 is a sort of mixed breed in this case and sometimes functions as an emotional number and sometimes as a mental number, as you will see in a moment. And so now we just finished speaking about the emotional numbers, and in a very natural way, we're moving to talk about the mental numbers. But before I keep talking any further, if you're enjoying this podcast and you want to keep learning more in-depth and quality numerology, make sure to click the subscribe button or the follow button, and turn on the notifications bell on the platform you're listening from. And make sure to become part of my numerology community. Also, make sure to follow me on Substack, where I write in-depth content about numerology and Dharma. Again, the link is in the episode description. And lastly, make sure to check out the comment section on YouTube, on Spotify, and just be part of the conversation. I love answering you guys. It's a great way to interact. Okay, having said that, let's continue. So, on the other side, right, we have the mental numbers. Those include 1, 4, 7, and 8. They tend to think much more rationally. They heavily rely on their intellect and try to avoid and control emotions. Generally speaking, one can say that from their perspective, emotions obscure the truth, and therefore one should set aside emotions when observing facts. So they tend to look at things in cutting ways, more cold and straightforward, and cancel or sometimes even stomp on the emotional component involved. Their contribution to polarized thinking can be seen in their strict, cutting, tough minded, and emotionally disconnected ways, where they don't let anything touch their heart or make them vulnerable or open to another possibility. As mentioned, you also see number 7 again in this list, right? So its behavior, and it's important for me to just explain this little point, will probably adapt to the numbers surrounding it. So if it's surrounded by more emotional numbers, it's gonna elicit out of it that side that is much more emotional and feeling deeply. And vice versa with the mental numbers. That's where it becomes a little bit more intellectual, controlling, mindy, etc. Okay? So again, the polarized thinking here, just to make sure it was clear, right, is that I don't let anything touch me emotionally. I'm becoming this sort of more rough machine. And I sometimes see things in a more robotic way. I don't see the human component, and that's always also dangerous. Every form of polarized thinking is dangerous. The next category is interesting because now what I want to talk about, I call personally extreme numbers. Now, what I want to explain here is that there are no standalone numbers that can be called extreme, but this is referring to number combinations, right? So when numbers are placed in number combinations, some numbers or like number combinations create a tendency for extremism. Now, from here on, This is a place where number combinations is an important theme, as I mentioned in the beginning, and perhaps I was miscalculating that there are more parts in this podcast, in this episode. I mean, that where I mentioned number combinations. If you want to dive deeper, as I said, you can sign up to my self-study course about number combinations. By the way, you can also read about number combinations in the only book I think is really relevant and good about the topic is of Matthew Goodwin. It doesn't go as deep as the self-study course, but it's still a valid source. So this, just so you know. Okay. So some examples, by the way, for let's say number combos that can be a bit extreme can be 1-9, 1-8, and 8-9. And also, by the way, repeating nines in the chart can be also create tendency to extremism, and repeating master numbers, my friends. Maybe that's something new to you. Many times people think that master numbers are like only good and amazing, and wow, I have many master numbers, I'm so amazing. But what you don't know, perhaps, is that master numbers create a tendency to extremism. So, by extreme number combinations, I'm referring to a behavior that is more fanatical, forceful, self-aggrandizing, disproportionate, and blind to everything else. Number combinations, that tend to be extreme can be extra forceful and self-aggrandizing in their ways and create polarization by trying to forcefully impose their ways of thinking on others. And sometimes they simply do not know when to stop. They don't know where the boundaries are, and their way of thinking and behaving can be very overpowering and not give space to anyone else. So one can say that there can be something a bit dictatorial in their tendency, or a bit of what I would call cult thinking, where they are the leader, of course, in their approach. Now, remember that I'm speaking archetypically here, okay? And not everyone who embodies any of the numbers I've mentioned now and earlier in the episode will necessarily abide completely by the templates I'm presenting here. Nevertheless, the direction, the seed, the tendency will be there. And I believe it's a good practice to become aware of our own tendencies to create polarization. Next, I want to talk about another unique number group, which I will call the unpredictable numbers. Again, this only applies to number combinations and not to any number as a standalone. So some examples here would be 5-7 and 2-5. Unpredictable number combinations tend to behave in messy ways, stormy ways, and they really love the mess. Sometimes if you try to offer them a clear and organized perspective or way of approaching things, they will simply reject it because it feels too unmessy, so to speak, or too sterile, quote unquote. So the thing with them is that they can be very inconsistent and always say something that must be other and different than what others express. But even that is inconsistent. The next moment, they might suddenly change their mind. And so, of all categories I presented so far, this one, in a way, is the least intentional in creating polarization. It mostly happens inadvertently most of the time. Something in them simply compels them to be a little bit out of the blue, a little bit disruptive. And by being so, they create a polarized way of thinking. So, last on the list for this episode, we have what I call the conflicted numbers. And wrongfully earlier, I said that, or mistakenly, I said that only from here the number combinations is relevant, but it's not true. It has been relevant also in the two previous categories. So we have the conflicted numbers, and here too, I'm referring to number combinations, as mentioned, that are mostly in disharmony with one another. That's what that's sort of like the condition that needs to be here in order to for this category to be called conflicted numbers. And this conflict breeds restlessness and a ready to fight type of personality. It can also create a highly untrusting personality. And their contribution to polarized thinking is by always having to fight and argue. They feel split inside of them, and so they must spill it out through fights and arguments. If I say something, they need to say the opposite. If I'll agree with the opposite, they will flip to the other side just to make a point, and so on and so forth. Conflict simply breeds more conflict. And in a way, they just tend to generate conflict. And in that way, they polarize. And by the way, a few examples for that can be 1, 2, 4, 5, and 4, 9. Just as an example of like strongly disharmonious numbers or conflicted numbers that can create this form of behavior I was just like describing a moment ago. And so now that I've covered all 7 categories of polarizing number behaviors that I wanted to cover in this episode, my questions to you is, where do you find yourself on this list? Some of you might find it a little more tricky to spot because you are, your combinations, let's say, are represented in more than one categories, more than one category. And that's perfectly fine. Not everyone has such a clear chart of only even numbers, right? You can have 3 even numbers and 2 odd numbers. That's what I mean. So you might find yourself like fluctuating between more than like 1 or 2 or maybe sometimes even 3 categories, but try to find the main one if you have such a one. That's perfectly fine. Just try to find which of the 7 categories are the most dominant in your numerology chart. That's really the point. Because this can be very helpful in conflict resolution on all levels, personal and collective, and simply can help all of us create a better future for ourselves and humanity using numerology. A future that, holds more understanding, compassion, and openness to the other. Now, if you aren't sure how to calculate your 5 core numbers, I'll add a link to a blog post of mine that teaches you how to do that. It's going to be in the episode description. So, my friends, before we wrap this up, if you've enjoyed this episode and you enjoy my podcast, make sure to subscribe and follow me and turn on the notifications bell on any platform you're listening from, and make sure to become part of my numerology community. Also, remember that you can follow me on Substack, where I write deep content about numerology and Dharma. The links, by the way, are all in the episode description. Remember to check out the comment section, leave a comment, be part of this conversation. It's a joy to communicate with you guys. And don't forget to also check out my numerology readings. Great way to experience numerology firsthand. And if you want to study numerology, well, you know what to do. Check out my numerology self-study courses and or my in-depth numerology certification studies if you want to really acquire deeper mastery of numerology. My friends, what a joy to share this with you. I hope you benefit from this. I'm very curious to hear about your thoughts and where you found yourself on these categories. Please make sure to Leave a message in the comments so that I know where you find yourself. And otherwise, I wish you well. And as always, I'll see you in the next episodes. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, and you want to go deeper into numerology, check out my website, tom-eckert.com. You can also book a numerology reading or even study numerology yourself through my courses. I'll see you in the next episode.